All right, everyone. Thanks for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started. We were able to confirm that the audio should be good, and you should be able to see the screen now. You should see a PowerPoint slide up. And hopefully you came because you want to get a little bit more information on this topic in improving WebCenter Portal performance by 30% and getting out of Oracle ADF development hell. Once again, I'm Jason Lehman. Happy to be joined by Fishbowl's Enterprise Architect, Jerry Aber.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
So with that, here's our agenda for today's meeting. I'm going to start with just a quick overview on Fishbowl Solutions, who we are and what we do and why we're different. Really focusing on why we chose this topic and how we've built up enough knowledge and through our experiences to talk about improving the performance of a web center-based portal. Jerry will cover most of the rest, starting with some industry info on the reasons portals fail to meet expectations. He'll also cover what those factors are from a technology standpoint that do impact web center portal performance and why we're going to focus on just one of those technologies. And from there, he'll lead into, and the majority of the presentation will be around the technologies that we've identified and have helped customers deploy to really optimize portal performance. So through those learnings and experiences and customer successes we've had, we've been able to identify some metrics and to share with you, if you take what you learned today and apply it to your web center-based portal, how you can get to that 30% improvement and what you could expect based on some customer metrics that we have in place. At the end, we'll answer those questions as I mentioned, but again, go ahead and submit those through the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible. But really, why are you here? So overall, the goal of this webinar is to help you understand how you can improve web center portal performance by 30%. And that 30% number is really in terms of page load times. So as we look at how a page loads on the portal, what are the things that we've done and have helped customers deploy to bring those page load times down? As you can imagine, that's paramount as you consider launching a portal and having a portal in place, is that if people go to the home page and go to that secondary page, if that takes too long to load, their user experience obviously would be affected. They might not come back. They'll see less value in using the portal or the intranet. And really share with you how we got there. So in terms of how we got that 30% improvement across the customer implementations we've had recently, what does it take to get there? Through lightweight application development and leveraging modern web development technologies over Oracle ADF. Also, how to architect a caching model. So caching the portal assets can also help improve the performance of the portal, as well as how to render components on a page and the load order, which definitely impacts performance as well. So these are really all the things to consider to get to that 30% performance improvement. And as we go through the presentation, Jerry will break those down by the various technology components that are listed here. So just a quick word or a few words on Fishbowl Solutions. Since our founding in 1999, we've really been focused on helping organizations solve costly and frustrating knowledge sharing problems. We were initially formed as a consulting services organization, really providing those value-add services around Oracle Web Center, both content management and portal. And since that time, we've built out a consulting and software development practice, not only around Web Center, but also Google Search and PTC Windchill and Creo. We really continue to add to our consulting expertise with all the learnings from the 1,000+ projects we've worked on to really help customers like yours, companies like yours, innovate and realize success with your investment in Oracle Web Center content and portal. And this includes building those value-add software solutions and developing that IP that we're going to share a little bit with you today to extend the capabilities of those platforms and help customers do more to realize more value. So when it comes to portal, we do have quite an extensive history going all the way back to 2010, probably even earlier than then. But really what started it for us is working with a large financial services company back in 2010 that had Web Center content, but they were using a different portal. And they basically wanted to integrate them because they had their portal assets, or they were going to be storing their portal assets in Oracle Web Center content. And so our approach was to leverage the content that was in Web Center content and build portlets, or leverage the portlets that were the standard at the time, JSR 286 portlets, and use that approach for the integration over Content Presenter. Along the way, we definitely had some scuffed knees with 11G. We worked through those inherent product issues with those first releases and the limitations, and we've really learned a lot since then, specifically around performance, as we're going to share today. We've really been able to bring it all together and take those learnings, take the technologies that are available, and put together what we called at the time Intranet in a Box, which was really a jumpstart package for intranet and portals. And the value that we saw there is, with the inherent limitations of the first versions of Portal, customers were having a really hard time just getting something built and live, just going to production with a live portal. There was just took a lot of time and development effort to get to that point. And so we saw some areas that we could come in and provide a framework with most of the assets needed to build the portal and get customers launched with their new portal in as little as 60 days. Since we've really moved to more of the front-end design focus, as we continue to hear about the problems and complexities and performance issues with Oracle ADF, to focus on more of those modern web development technologies to enhance the user experience. And now with the portal development framework we have in place today and being used by numerous customers, last year alone we worked on 4 different employee or HR portals. We really feel now that we have in place a best practice approach, methodology, and framework to help you launch your new portal or enhance your current portal. And again, all that history we've had and the learnings really has helped us differentiate. We have a proven team of experts on staff now, from the technology aspects, the front-end design, as well as architecture. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we have that solution in place that enables customers to deploy a new portal or improve their existing one, and do so in a much expedited manner with less complexity. We continue to leverage Web Center content as a repository for all those portal assets, which in most cases provides a lot of value to customers, not only because they've invested in the Web Center content and maybe have they view it as content as infrastructure, where they're storing a lot of their content there, so why not continue to leverage it, but also in terms of the capabilities it provides with versioning, workflow, and auditing. And around that, that's really enabled us to develop other value-add solutions that can help administrators manage and expedite access to the portal, load assets into the portal, automate workflows and some of those approvals, as well as providing visibility to the age of the assets on your portal and when they need to be updated, for example, if there's a compliance reason. We have a proven delivery process as well. We take, in a lot of cases, an agile-like approach to our portal projects, but really start with the information gathering, focus on the user experience, and then we deploy. And this framework also supports the move to the cloud. So Jerry will share that a little bit later, but we just want to make you aware that what we're going to be talking about today and showing you kind of sets a good foundation if you're considering moving to the cloud as well. And so before I turn it over to Jerry, I just wanted to highlight one such customer that we've been working with for many years now and really have helped them realize their true portal vision. This company is a large health insurance provider. They were one of the early adopters of WebCenter Portal 11G and struggled initially just with their launch and getting something live. And so we approached them with a framework that really positioned Oracle Web Center content as that infrastructure piece. And through our Portal Solution Accelerator offering, which integrates that content with the portal to produce for them a corporate intranet that they could serve their assets from Web Center content to the portal, but also expose those inherent social capabilities they were looking for, as well as personalization. And our model really sticks to providing a user-driven site structure with reusability and ease of contribution, allowing it to be redeployed across many different environments. So that was key to them, and as they looked at the portal that they wanted to launch and wanted to go forward with as they considered other portals that they might get built. So not only did we help them expedite the launch of their portal, but we also, with this framework, helped them really improve that collaboration across their groups through the ability to, in this case, add microsites to their intranet, improve the overall communication efficiency with familiar role-based contribution across groups, with that frequent contribution, which leads to fresh content, and because the site's being updated more and timelier, so that just ensures that when visitors come, users come, they're seeing that fresh and new content that's relevant to them. But I really wanted to highlight this customer because this customer is really our first opportunity to work with them on performance. So with their launch and their portal, we saw a page load time of actually 70% improvement as we utilized things like dynamic compression. And in tuning their portal, which when you consider that they had 12,000 total users with 300 of them being concurrent, we really wanted to create some benchmarks around those numbers and what we did to get to those improvements so that we could apply those techniques for other customers, which Jerry will get to in just a few moments. So that's really setting the stage on why we've taken a framework approach and why we're leveraging more of the modern web development techniques over ADF. And to learn a little bit more about that, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Well, I'm going to kick things off with what we see in some of our experiences in some industry with why, what some of the causes are for failed portals. So the first thing we're going to touch on is the 5 common problems. There's a couple of statistics that we pulled from Gartner that lets things start off, talk about the portal initiatives and why they fail. 40% of portal initiatives fail to garner adequate adoption to achieve ROI. Or your return on investment is a difficult thing to capture on a portal, especially an internet perspective. So those get lost rather easily. Second is portal initiatives that are scrapped altogether for various reasons. There's a number of things that might cause the portal to be scrapped, and those portal problems center around 5 key areas. One is low adoption. Why is it not being adopted? Why is it not being used? There's various reasons around design and or functionality that might drive that. The cost and complexity. It's a very heavy, expensive application server, and what is the bang for the buck that you're getting by deploying an intranet or microsites around that intranet? No governance. A lot of customers will fire up a portal rather quickly, get it going, but don't put any governance around the process. Then there's a lack of relevant content. Once you initiate a new portal, you must keep content fresh and ongoing to keep people coming back and direct communication plans to that environment in order to drive that type of experience. Many of them fail to do that and review that content after launch. And the centerpiece of all those problems is around poor user experience. And that poor user experience can be driven in many ways, sometimes the design, but the underpinning of some of those are around performance. It has its legs in performance. It affects user adoptions. Performance affects the complexity and the workarounds you might address to deal with those. And that user experience and those behaviors affect that user adoption. So it's a slippery slope when it comes to those pieces, and those are consistent with a lot of the initial projects we hear, especially from customers who might be moving from older portal technologies to WebCenter as well. So some of the technologies that are impacting a WebCenter portal, and when you look at performance, it's a proactive activity. You need to be thinking about performance early on in the process, from a project planning perspective, from a design perspective, from a development perspective, way before you hit performance tuning. There are other areas that affect performance that are in the mix, such as your identity management and security, and whether or not that platform can support the loads that hit mornings or afternoons right after lunch when you're dealing with your concurrent users and your user base coming back from periods of time. Configurations on the Oracle HTTP server, out of the box, and how many you have there affect that front-end performance. The integrations and those patterns you use. There's a lot of conversations these days and development around the digital workplace concepts. That requires integrations to your back office systems to service up portions or pieces of data about myself or about the things I need to do my job that make the experience a really good one for those users. If those integration patterns to the back office systems do not support getting, for example, your PTO balance and how you display that widget or component, you have to consider what the source system's ability is to deal with those amount of calls, depending on what they are and the traffic that happens. Just recently, a customer did a lot of performance testing a couple of months ago, and the one thing that was holding up was integration with PeopleSoft. So you have to take that piece out in order to continue the performance test, and then deal with those pieces as they come up. The other is around database. Those deal with a lot of misconfiguration. The Oracle documentation is pretty clear on where to drive that and tune that, but it cannot be left on a stone unturned. Our focus is going to be around the Portal App Server and the ADF Taskflows, and specifically the ADF approach to building or the development patterns around that in the form of custom ADF Taskflows and the use of Content Presenter Taskflow, which is the out-of-the-box content server integration for showing content. And I want to make sure you don't miss the importance of understanding your design and your integration expectations throughout the process. It's one thing to get your system tuned, it's another thing to get those pieces working in a manner that they're all tied together. So those are very key elements to the process. So let's kind of start out where some of our experience has taken us and people we've talked to at the various shows. A lot of times a customer will get WebCenter Portal, WebCenter content, and they'll fire up an intranet or a site to start the process. It's usually IT focused. It makes for an easy deployment. They kind of build or do a limited out-of-the-box set of components with ADF, and then do some minor tuning, and their expectations aren't very high, So you end up with a nice, fast-moving sports car down the highway, but you got to wonder what's going to happen during the next set of activities that take place. So in the past, getting things stood up quick was a nice way to show some return on your investment for the purchase of WebCenter, and use some out-of-the-box adoption of pieces, and then maybe do a lightweight design. But what you're not taking, many people aren't taking into consideration is, what are my growth expectations? What does my roadmap look like? And how is this going to grow? And how can I reuse what I'm creating? So you might get that initial 100-user hit and a fairly fast car right out of the chute. But as it inevitably pops up, business requests drive more activity. Either more users are being driven there because there's some simple content they want to get access to, more pages are added, more task flows are built out, your development is expanded, your servers and your costs tend to go up. So there's always a phase 2 on the horizon. So, but more common than not, your portal starts to feel like a resource-heavy solution. You're adding more pages, more physical pages, you're adding more task flows. They might not be designed and built as reusable task flows. And so that combination of ADF and Content Presenter with performance and cache equals increased hardware and software administration. More resources basically get thrown at solving that if you haven't architected your solution well to begin with. Then you start ending up with your nice, fast sports car with a drag of a trailer behind it. And at some point in time, you're going to end up trading that combination in and going back to square one. So, major reasons that we're seeing from an ADF perspective around portal performance. Pure ADF-based portals suffer from portal performance because it limits limited front-end UX development, and are time and cost intensive. I'm not sure how many of you might have tried to do ADF development yet, but a few years ago, before we started to transition our model, it took 6, 8, 12 months for the average customer to get up to speed on doing the proper ADF development and thinking through the process of how that paradigm works. So initially, first major leg for the poor performance is around heavy JavaScript libraries. Before compression and before doing anything major on your landing page, you might end up with a 1.5 or 2.5 meg size page, not even considering what the imagery might be looking like at that stage. There's back-end overhead, server-side rendering, and one of the major problems is sequential task flow rendering. From the development limitations, you have no control over the HTML output. New task flows take weeks to develop. You have issues with 6 or more task flows per page. And a lot of our designs we're seeing now have 8, 9, 12 task flows on the page. It takes 3 to 6 months minimally, and that's with some senior developers to ramp up on developing an ADF. There's a high cost associated with that. Freaking downtime due to JDeveloper code testing. You cannot deploy some of those ADF components if you're rendering content through custom ADF task flows without bouncing the servers and bringing those back into play. Custom development time it takes to make it mobile ready. Oracle has improved the platform to develop in some of those things, but 9 times out of 10, you're making customizations to make that fit your site design. It tends to be a lack of adoption for some customers who have not adopted ADF as a platform type of development paradigm in their organization, and they feel like there's limited ROI, and the skills are very difficult to find. So where does that leave us? Like Jason had mentioned in the slide earlier, we've gone through a progression over the years in terms of how we approach our portal deliveries. And it's based on a Portal Solution Accelerator IP that we have that kickstarts how we do our portal work. So basically, Portal Solution Accelerator is a set of software and services for rapid portal setup and deployment. The reason there's rapid setup and deployment is because we've done many of these, and what we're seeing is 99% of the portals we're doing have a lot of the same components in them. Carousels, events, announcements, web content, document lists, things of that nature that we can package as a startup. And the only thing that would drive the difference is what your site design experience is going to look like. It consists of WebCenter Portal and content bundles, which is basically a collection of codes, pages, assets, and content templates that's used as our starting point for what your site design functionality might be. Content integration is performed via Fishbowl single page application task flow that we're going to talk about today, which is at the crux of our performance improvements for that 30%. There's also additional features in there that resonate with many customers, like personalization. So you can target content, and that concept of showing content resonates for them based on who they are and who they are when they're logged in. And the foundational benefits are time to market, speed and performance, web developer friendly, and reusability. Here at Fishbowl, we're big on frameworks and reusability because we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. We've seen it in a number of our customers. So what kind of makes that up? When you're thinking about Oracle Web Center, if you bought Oracle Web Center, why do I have to put Portal Solution Accelerator on top of that? So as you think about going through using out-of-the-box configuration models, minimum to major customization to a final solution, those are the thought processes you go through about how can I use what I have and do it quickly and make it manageable so my total cost of ownership is lower. Well, first off, you have WebCenter Portal, your services, your content that you bought from Oracle. You put that in play, use it out of the box, you can go so far. There's some decent task flows, there's some decent features, but everybody tends to change their site design and use the features a little bit differently to achieve their user adoption goals and user experience goals. So you can do some configuration in there to tweak that, but what happens is we put the Fishbowl Portal Solution Accelerator on top of that to help extend that process to include libraries, pages, page layouts, predefined task flows that are configurable, and components and services and assets that are already there to kind of start the process. We might extend that with some minimal development with regards to skinning and templates, ADF, even our SPA Taskflows, even reformatting some of the Oracle out-of-the-box ones, or maybe changing some of the core templates we have from our single-page application library. You might extend that to some more major development activities that would involve responsive design, and they might involve more SPA-based task flows that are based on data integration to your back office systems or Internet of Things or microservices or whatever your cloud situation might be. That PSA framework incorporates those new pages and task flows into the main site structure. Delivering the solution from there is completely extendable. It is not invasive to the Oracle WebCenter platform. The Oracle WebCenter platform, from a portal perspective, does what portals do. It allows you to aggregate many assets on many pages. So PSA is, like I said, it's a design, it's a starting point for how a portal site might go, so you're not starting from scratch. And it allows you to get time to market quicker. So at the crux, the foundation of how we do some of our integration with data and or content is through a technique called single-page applications. For those of you that have not heard about what single-page applications are, the definition, you see it here based on our architecture, is an application or website that fits on a single web page. All the necessary code, the HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS are retrieved in a single page load. Page updates dynamically through user interaction. In a traditional web app, every time the app calls the server renders a new HTML page. In a SPA single-page application model, after the first page loads, all interaction with the server happens through AJAX calls. These AJAX calls return data, not markup, usually in a JSON format. The app uses JSON data to update the page dynamically without reloading the page. And this is the first big impactful area of the overall solution that affects that 30% that we mentioned earlier. The single-page application for Oracle WebCenter Portal, the goal for this solution is to provide the best possible user experience and flexible UI for portal users without enhancing ADF task flows. So how does that happen? First off, we overhaul the ADF UI and instead utilize the latest frameworks and libraries. Why? Because it provides you the flexibility to match your team's development skills. ADF isn't a driver in this case. We make it modular. ADF and the SPA components are added from the resource catalog and dropped onto the page. Our single-page application model uses a component called Modular Single-Page Application. It's one singular resource catalog item that you configure and pass in the parameters for the various components you want on the page. For example, the My Apps one you see here. It provides the ability to use one task flow with multiple backend templates and place many task flows on the page that will leverage the passed-in parameters to drive flexibility. Configure versus develop, because after a certain point in time, you're going to add new pages and new features. And lastly, we still maintain the ADF backend and the server-side interaction maintained by the ADF model layer. It still leverages that backend layer provided by WebCenter platform. It's what it's good at, and we're using it for what it's best at and not what it's most challenging at, which is the front end. So what are some front ends for a single-page application on WebCenter Portal that are available? SP allows for other ones to be used. We've been using a lot of Bootstrap or Oracle Jet. That doesn't mean you can't use React.js like Facebook and Instagram. Angular has been a conversation of ours lately on a couple of potential customers. And then depending on your skill sets and your development paradigms, you can interact with whichever library set you wish and still follow the model. What might that look like? So if you take an example screen here, we could consume ADF task flows and single-page application task flows on the same page. They can coexist. You assemble a page with many features on it. And for example, an ADF task flow could be that marketing dashboard where it says revenue by year, and the single-page application task flow might be the My Apps list of applications off on the right. And the rest of the components, like the carousel, the study documents, the events, announcements, could be additional SPA task flows, or it could even be an out-of-the-box component that's provided by WebCenter Portal and configured to work on that site. The big note here is if you're in a place where you are a heavy ADF-based portal already, and you want to move to a development platform like single-page application, or excuse me, development pattern like that, you can easily do that and transition over time versus taking a big bang approach. We have a couple of customers who are on our older version of PSA, formerly Internet in a Box, using basically JSP portlets, and this approach can coexist there as well. So you can actually transition over time as opposed to net new build and kind of learn that skill set yourself as the project progresses. It's a very good justification awareness for customers who don't have time or budget to make a big switch quickly, but they need to start making some adjustments because they are hitting some of those performance challenges or they are hitting some of those development challenges. Well, kind of what does it look like? It's easy configuration. What you're looking at on the screen here is the Fishbowl single-page application resource catalog item that you drag and drop on the page. This particular setup has basically got 5 parameters on it that help drive how we use our single-page model and how our front end might use it. The key things there that are interesting are the front-end cache GUID, so you can map this content to a cache GUID. The template.js file, which is the start of getting at the code on the back end, which we'll talk about in a minute, and any parameters you might have designed in for this particular task flow that this recent news template.js is expecting. So what you might see as you create more in your environment is this singular page application drag and drop on the page 4 times, and the template is a different name. Could be recent news, could be events, could be a document list, it might even be a PTO widget. So let's take a look at what the single page resource loading overview looks like. So when you look at that recent news template, the loading of it is as follows. Server side and client side, basically activities. On the client side, the page has maybe SPA2 in the middle there on it, and the template interacts with the JS libraries, the CS, and the imagery, and the mustache templates. On the server side, it communicates with the portal via the Ajax JSON and performs the Groovy script code that might interact with the content server and or data sources. Now, we don't want to lose sight of mobile topics as well, but to illustrate some industry familiarity, sites like Facebook and LinkedIn follow similar best practices when it comes to mobile first, with areas such as the instant page loading or lazy loading, single page application models loaded in parallel, or their development paradigm would be loading the content and information in parallel, image and assets scripts only requested when viewport screen is in place, and mobile design approach, cache UI, and refresh capabilities. But I'd like to point out the one that ties into our single page application model, and that's number 2, the second one listed there, that impacts that 30% that we're talking about, and that's loading in parallel. So when you hit the page and there's 8 to 10 different task flows on that page, they are all loaded in parallel as opposed to in sequential order like it would today out of the box with the ADF components. So as we do portal work and design and develop with the mobile first best practices, our portal sites kind of then come along for the ride, if you will, and help support that mobile delivery model that the particular customer might have. So let's talk a little bit about the single page application architecture. You're going to have a page with various components on it, and you might have an article component or a side component or something, a footer, or many of these pages have multiple pieces on them. What goes on there is the single page application so that it can work interactively with the various front-end delivery channels for mobile and desktop through a responsive design approach. It supports that very nicely. And in that single page application, we are making account for compression, cache, any kind of admin interface to help the experience to manage any kind of charting, leveraging templates, leveraging components that might be out there. What that does is interacts well with the Portal Solution Accelerator backend, which allows us to manage contribution, cache on the backend, workflows, security, personalization, and mashups. That Portal Solution Accelerator fits and works with Oracle Cloud Portal as a Cloud Service, which was recently announced, as well as WebCenter on-prem portal and content. So the model will work with each because the Portal Cloud Service and the on-prem portal are basically the same thing. SPA sits on top and it's agnostic to whatever that portal piece is. If you wish to extend that model in service of other things on your pages, you might pull from a business intelligence suite. You might pull from another cloud source or SharePoint or Liferay portal and bring that all together with whatever your development paradigm is going to be, whether you're going to leverage JavaScript libraries, Oracle Jet, .NET, or even if you have to go down the ADF path. So there's flexibility there. Now, when comparing pure ADF versus modular SPA, there's some pros and cons to both. I want to make sure there's full disclosure here, but some of you might be wondering what some of those pros and cons are. So kind of look down the left and look at pure ADF perspective. Some of the pros, it's declarative, drag and drop, little front-end development experience needed. It's basically an Oracle standard. There's a lot going on in the Oracle space with ADF. There's no UI cross-browsing device testing required. From a cons perspective, it's serial rendering on server side, causing a longer initial page load, and that's the big gotcha, which is what drove us to come up with a different method to do this. There's longer development iterations, and it's very difficult for front-end developers, and let alone even regular Java developers. A modular single-page application task flow flips that paradigm a bit, and it's full front-end HTML and CS control. Skills are available out there in the market. That's client-side generated templates, HTTP2 support. Third-party design agencies can play into this model very well. A lot of our portal projects, at least 3/4 of them, are using outside design firms to do the design activities. It's supported, Oracle-supported isomorphic task flow apps with Nashorn, and front-end can be platform agnostic. For example, I can take an SPA task flow from Portal and put it on a BI backend or even Sites Cloud Service. The cons, it takes some intermediate to advanced JavaScript, HTML, and CSS knowledge. Not as bad as having to learn ADF, but still takes a little bit more strength in those skills. Modern browsers and IE 9 plus and up are supported. Device and browser testing are required because the developer has more control over the front end, so you now have to plan for and account for more cross-browser testing and device testing from a responsive design perspective under this model. So some of the benefits. So a single-page application for Oracle WebCenter Portal, from what we've heard and seen, and we co-develop and co-author, if you will, a lot of times in our projects. So we get immediate feedback from the developers as well, not just handing off the development work we do. So the client-server independence, multiple components dropped on a page. Like I said, in many cases, based on digital workplace models, everybody wants a lot on their pages these days or quickly accessible from those pages. Components are context-aware. There's more flexibility for responsive design. We're lining up better with the browser functionality because it's the standard web technologies. And HTML, Java, and Groovy is a much better tech play over ADF task flows. And minimal wrap-up time, I can tell you, we have used, some of our junior developers have learned this during the course of the last year or two as well. And versus 3 to 6 months for mid to senior level developers, we can see a junior developer picking this up in 2 to 3 weeks. Business users also see benefits from this process. There's a decreased time to market because now you're developing faster, you're deploying faster, you're getting feedback quicker. There's better performance. You're seeing quicker snap to your pages. It's fluid. Users pick up apps to display much easier. Mobile ready, because everything is being mobile driven these days. And you transform the interface and deploy across multiple platforms, like I mentioned, whether you're sitting on top of Sites Cloud Service, BI, Liferay, whatever the model is going to be, and gives you that independence and protects your investment over the course of time. So when it comes to protecting that investment, everybody knows where the Oracle platform is going these days. So when we're looking at, take a couple minutes to talk about that investment. And as Oracle is moving to the cloud in a lot of areas that might affect you from a web center perspective, you want to make sure you can protect that investment, and not only protect it, but extend it. So when you take a look at Oracle's direction with Document Cloud Service, Process Cloud Service, Mobile Cloud Service, Sites Cloud Service, and now, as a recent release, February, I believe, it was Portal Cloud Service. Those components pulled together still play with the investment and the development approach that I've been talking about. The Portal System Accelerator and the SPA model fits with Sites Cloud Service, Document Cloud Service, and PCS. And as this direction to the move of CaaS, or Content as a Service, and this term called headless CMS model being considered, it gives you the flexibility to lift and shift, redeploy, repurpose, and leverage newer capabilities as they get rolled into your organization. And those skills are still transferable because you're still following the same development paradigm. So let's talk about one of the major components that's involved in the Portal System Accelerator and single page application model we have, and that's caching. And it cannot overstate this enough, that your caching model needs to be thought of early and often with this process. So we leverage Coherence, and for those of you who don't know what Coherence is, Oracle has a standalone product called Oracle Coherence, and it's an in-memory data grid solution that enables you to predictably scale those mission-critical applications. It handles more data in real time and offloads that burden of shared data services and provide availability guarantees. So even though a lot of our customers are not using the Oracle product called Oracle Coherence, we are still leveraging the local version of that comes with WebCenter Portal. So we leverage this local version of WebCenter Portal that allows us to select content, and we built our own little components on the content server and portal side to manage these profiles that manage content that's served up through events and carousels and pushes that to the portal through this model. So there's a user experience from an administrative perspective for managing cache, refreshing cache. And even when you're contributing content like navigation items, contributors want to see those rather quickly. So we give them tools to refresh their cache immediately. So you can manage or view those items through the cache items through this Portal UI, and the configuration updates are made to support, so there's no limitations or expirations on this. We're just using the out-of-the-box local coherence and the standard configuration that are set up with that. Those features to the front end are a key element of this experience as well, because you do get a lot of caching challenges. And we've seen a lot of caching challenges with customers who are first learning to contribute on their own as you're pushing the ownership of the portal from IT to the business. They want to see quick changes, but still see things perform quickly. So the caching layer is tantamount to a design decision that we made a couple years ago to improve that. At the center of how we're pulling this caching model off is a component tool called Redis. We leverage Redis as a means to create a central publishing model for updated content to the cache. We basically do a subscribe, unsubscribe, and publish type model with the Redis tool. The reason we do this approach is, I know out of the box you can use Content Presenter and configure some cache, for Content Presenter to work. But the other side of the equation is data. So the reason we do this is to provide a method for data cache as well as content cache without having to do custom options for data. We simply extend the model for new data needs, and customer sees this as a singular platform for data and content caching. And in situations where we co-develop, the customer can follow the same patterns and leverage those same development activities. So how does that work and look? So what you see on this screen here is how this Coherence and Redis implementation is done with us. The content server is basically has a UI that manages the profiles being considered for cache. So as you set up profiles in our model, a profile manages a certain type of content, which would be events, carousels, web content. And the content server manages the updates from check-ins and metadata changes. to ensure these updates are pushed to the Redis or to the portal nodes. Each portal node has Coherence enabled on it with out-of-the-box configurations or tweaks if we need to make some tweaks based on a certain installation. And Redis must sit on one of those portal nodes or another location, and that node acts as the listener or subscriber for the other portal nodes to get updates from during the course of content updates or data updates. In some cases, that Redis red node might be on the inbound refinery managed server, in case you don't want to deal with any downtime situations. The SPA development pattern is kind of in the middle of this, and it works off of those assumptions, works with the cache, and the code is designed to go after the cache as opposed to it directly to the data source. So let's take a look at some customer metrics. This customer recently went live here a few weeks ago. A large communications company. They did an employee portal, digital workplace type experience. Their environment is made up of 3 physical machines with 3 portal nodes, 1 portlet node, 1 content node for each physical machine. Their site stats, I just wanted to bear out and make sure everybody's aware, there are actually 50 static pages in this site with 5 dynamic pages. Now, it's not the number of pages that affects performance, but it is a key metric to your total cost of ownership. The majority of the content is served up through the 5 dynamic pages. You can imagine the economies of scale you have from a development perspective and ownership perspective with most of your content coming up through dynamic pages. You still might need some specific formatted pages that do fit for purpose activities, but you want to drive your reuse where possible. Large number of employees of 80,000 plus. So stats on their performance testing metrics before they gave their go live. Concurrent target users of 1,400, the login landing page time of less than 4.5 seconds, which is logging in as well as hitting the landing page and serving up the landing page for 1,400 concurrent users, with a secondary page time, any of those dynamic pages or those other static pages of less than 2.5 seconds. And a lot of their pages have a lot of Taskflows on them. No less than 6. So the next target was 1,700 concurrent users, login landing page of less than 5 seconds, and on average login secondary page less than 3 seconds. And it is a Portal App Server recommendation by Oracle that there are 200 concurrent users per portal node in that environment. So in summary, some of the portal optimization best practices, there are many layers to dealing with portal performance, but one of them is modular single page application versus ADF, and that's where most of our conversations were spent today. Dynamic versus static pages. That's not necessarily a portal optimization area, but it is a best practice we tend to share with everybody as much as possible. The more static pages you have, the more ownership you have, the more different testing you have to do to make sure that your performance across the site. The caching model for content and data. Personalization versus security or both. When you set up a portal, especially in the intranet, you might drive personalization, you might have security requirements around that. There's optimization around dealing with both of those. And we deal with personalization not only at the content level, data level, but at the menu level as well. So you can actually drive a large site to a certain number of people and make it look like it's their own site, which takes me to the next best practice is evaluating one singular site, maybe driven by personalization security, versus microsites, which could still use personalization security but have a different fit for use purpose, like United Way campaigns or departmental sites. Web asset compression is a key best practice. It normally happens just before you're going to a level on your project that you're going to hit performance testing. And then responsive design is the best practice to make sure you're taking responsive design into consideration earlier rather than later to avoid the expense of changing down the line. So those all tie in to the 30% with the major 2 elements in terms of the parallel rendering and how we deal with the JSON information that comes back versus the heavy HTML. So with that in mind, I will transition that over to Jason, and thank you for your time today.
Yeah, so everyone, thanks again for attending. We do have some time to answer some questions, and considering we started a couple minutes late, Jerry is willing to stay a little bit late as well to answer any of those questions. And so through some issues with our Zoom Q&A component, we're not able to take those through the Q&A box, but you can ask those questions through the chat box. So go ahead and, if you have a question right now, go ahead and ask those. We do have a few coming in. So Jerry, one question here is, how long have you seen it take for developers to learn the SPA techniques to be productive?
That's a really good question, and we have some really recent results as we're working with current Portal customers that have gone live in the last month and a half or 2 months here. On both of those occasions, there was co-development activities that took place. We did a couple, 3-4 hours of training on how the process works with single-page application. They were medium to experienced Java developers already, and they understood the front end and a little bit about the portal. They were up and productive in less than 2 weeks. They were still going through some challenges with respect to maybe their particular task flows. So maybe they were trying to hit a Jive API or trying to hit something unique to their environment, which extended that. But they understood the core model with how to deal with the components, write your mustache templates, work with your Groovy code, and then service that back up to the portal. So senior individuals will do it rather quickly. Junior individuals will still do it rather quickly with a little bit of a learning curve.
And another question here, Jerry, on average, how long does it take to create a single page application task flow?
We've seen them getting done as soon as 3 or 4 days, depending on the complexity of the task flow and whether or not there's other features go along with it. But if you're just going after content or data, formatting that on the page, we can see that being done in anywhere from 2 to 5 days.
Okay, great. Another question here, Jerry. So what is the time to market impact? Let me make sure I'm reading this right. What is the time to market impact of Portal Solution Accelerator?
That's a really good question. That has some variability to it. But what we're seeing with the PSA, we call Rev 4 today, we have a number of functions that are already in place, provided the customer likes them working the way they're working. Tied to your site design, which is a little bit of the wild card, can occur inside of, if you took the site skin maybe we give you and start with, you can do it as little as 2 to 3 weeks, minus security and personalization and integrations. But this core portal, with that skin and our core functionality, it's very, very quick. But I will tell you that 100% of the time, the customer is changing that based on their site design. So we use it as a template, and each of those components becomes a template. And depending on how many have to be created or adjusted, we just create a new one based on that source code and move on from there. So overall, a project like that with a minimal site design change, with contributions, some integrations, security and personalization, could be done fairly quickly in the 3 to 4 month time frame. But out of the box, we can start one up very, very fast. I see one more on here that somebody's asking, what does local coherence cache mean? What that means is Coherence, Oracle has a product called Coherence, and they designed the WebCenter Portal to also leverage what's called local coherence cache. So that's a feature in the configuration of the Portal app server. I use the term local because it's not in the portal, or it's not in the, what you call the product Oracle Coherence grid. It's local only to the portal nodes. I hope that answers your question. But sorry if I confused you by using the term local, but it's strictly around the nodes in the portal.
Well, at this point, Jerry, we do not have any more questions coming through the chat box. So I think with that, we're going to look to conclude today's webinar. So I want to thank everyone again for attending. Look for an email in a couple days with a link to the recording. But until then, if you need any more information about topics we covered today, or if you're just looking to get in touch with Fishbowl, there's multiple ways to do that, which I've left on the screen here. So I wish everyone a great day, and hopefully we can chat again soon. Take care, everyone, and thanks again for attending.